All right, everybody, welcome back to Wesley the Writer. I'm Wesley, and today we're going to talk about how my spirituality shapes my decision making. Um, and I'm pretty sure, even with the last couple of episodes, you can understand that when I'm when I talk about spirituality, I'm talking more from a personal standpoint, and I know that again, you have your own personal walk with God whenever you do that. Um, but there are still things to be shared, especially with um, how God and how spirituality shapes our thinking whenever we approach any issue. So let's get into it with that. I really want to talk about listening to what God is saying. Um, whenever we get saved, right? When I got saved, the first thing I did was come to the service and sit and listen. And that's the most important part. Um, when I got saved, it was because I was brought back in, rather, I should say, um, by my grandfather's ambitions. He had really inspired me to get back into the church and to start actually paying attention to what was being said. He really helped guide me to understanding what uh, my responsibilities were to myself and my family, um, to God first, though. And when I began getting like really invested into the word, I started to shift my thinking from thinking about myself to thinking about the people around me, like I had mentioned before. And so when we first are brought into the church, I think a lot of people kind of, after they come off the hype of, going to the front and repenting and, there's tears and the music and everything, the emotions are swelling. Well, when the emotions come down, you should really start focusing on the real reasons why you're seeking God. A lot of people try to seek God through hardship. When things happen that are outside of their control, they start running to the church because they need some form of grounding in order to bounce back. And that's okay. And that's, one of the main reasons why the church is here. But also, I think that people should understand that you have to know about God. God does not stop at the music. You know, just listening to the music or even the sermon, whenever you enter service and you start really enjoying yourself, you should really start paying attention to the messaging, and you should really start getting into reading the word for yourself. I had a couple of guys talking to me about what that really meant, as far as getting into the word and actually and reading it. I think one comment was like, "Well, you're just reading the word and you're getting your own understanding out of it, right?" Well, no. And the reason I say no is because you're not reading the word on your own. That's what I meant when I had talked that last week about the importance of leadership. You have to find yourself a spiritual leader who spends time with God on a consistent basis, who knows the word, who has been taught the word themselves by the institution that God had sent them to. Um, my bishop, uh, Bishop Wesley Miller Sr., my daddy, he spent years in in Bible college. He went to, I think it was Wisdom University, and he has his doctorate degree in biblical wisdom. And so, take that for what you will. Um, but you have to find someone passionate about the word and who spends time with God in order to learn from them. Uh, that doesn't mean that every pastor or every bishop has to have a full blown degree, but that does mean that you have to pay attention to what the man of God is doing and saying. Um, That's not to try to run up and correct the man of God whenever he's saying something or trying to one up someone. That's just to say, sit down, listen to what's being said, let God lead you, and move accordingly. Um, the more that you spend time with God, the more you begin to hear his voice. And so you have to do those things. And that's what I have been doing in order to continue to grow in what God is saying, or and to at least to let God use me in the way that He would want to use me. And so that's really it when it comes to the listening part. And actually, when you sit down and when you start hearing what God is saying through the Word, and when God starts really talking to you and really guiding you into what you need to be doing, that's when you can really start to grow. And that growth comes, and depending on what God is using you for, it can come very quickly, and sometimes it might take a little while. But as long as you're staying focused in what the word is saying, and rather what the word is revealing to you, what God is revealing to you, then that growth is going to be exponential once it happens. Shifting gears a little bit, we're talking about seed now. And so with seed, when God finally you start using you and starts, and when you really start being watered, because let's face it, whenever you're in the word, whenever you get down, sit down and focus, you are the seed and you're being watered. That's a really good analogy. Like we're talking about growing trees, right? With seed. But think about it. Whenever you start to get taught, right? Something, right? You're starting to grow in that knowledge base. And so a lot of times whenever we're talking about growth, we're talking about financial growth, but we need to start focusing more on what spiritual growth is. And spiritual growth allows us to combat what happens in the world. It allows us to defend ourselves from the bombardment of all of this mental decay that's going around, all of these wandering souls that are trying to find themselves. Whenever we have a spiritual backing, something that protects us from that foolishness, we can really stand on our own and actually have a voice and actually say something. So we don't have to concern ourselves with the folly that is, twisted ideology and, some backwards thinking. Whenever we get to the source, right, and we actually start focusing on what it is that is really said to us, our seed is sprouting and we're growing into what we're supposed to be. And you'll notice that throughout the word, the seed that's planted, the tree that grows, and the fruit that's produced is the epitome of like most of the analogies in the Bible. You know, whenever we're talking about that, we're talking about growth, and we're talking about being fruitful, and then having and multiplying from that. That's the main analogy, and it works very well to explain how what God is trying to do in our lives, um, how He does that. And so thinking about that, that's just really how my thinking has been shifted over the years. That's the reason why I've begun not looking at having children as a burden, which a lot of women these days have been thinking that way, especially with a lot of these abortion activists and stuff. People really just wanting to live on their own and be in their own truths and having pets rather than children because pets are easier. I guess because they die quicker or something. I don't know. But, those are all manipulative lies told to you by a system that wants to keep you from really growing and really being who you're meant to be. You'll have a lot of apologists and a lot of complainers talk about the reasons why that's not true, especially in the like fringe, off, kind of off kilter uh, arguments like, some women can't have children, and some men are lame, or they can't do this, or somebody can't do that. Okay, when we put ourselves in the body of Christ, right? And I love the story of Abraham for this. You know, father of many nations, more children than there are stars. God spoke to Abraham when, in those moments back then. And in that story, you can see that it's not something that is a physical obstacle to have children. It's more so a understanding that whoever God puts into your life can be your child. Whenever we're at the church, right? And it's sad because there are so many young folk who need help. But everybody keeps talking about send help to Ukraine, send help everywhere else. Everybody else needs help. But what about our own children? What about the people who are coming up, taking care of us as we age and get older? You know, what about them? We have to take care of them. They need mothers and fathers. So where are the mothers and fathers? Well, I can tell you where one is. Me. I'm in the church, and I'm doing what I need to do in order to take care of those children in the way that I can. So anybody who comes in, any young person who comes in, they can know that they have someone to take care of them in the church, and that's going to be Deacon Wesley. All right? But aside from just me, if we all have that mindset to take care of our responsibility, to stop pretending like we can't be what it is that God wants us to be, that just because we can't physically have children, that we can't take care of the children around us, that we can't take care of the families around us, that we can't be a blessing in that way for someone who might need help. If we keep pretending like that's the case, then we'll never have anything. We'll never get anywhere. We'll always be angry and miserable and always complaining and never growing. We'll be like the fig that didn't produce any fruit. Cursed. We'll be cursed. Is that fulfilling? No, it's not. And so that's why we need to stop pretending like we can't have things, like we can't do things, like we can't be something more than what we are. We have to hold ourselves, like I mentioned before, to higher standards. And if we hold ourselves to higher standards, then we'll get more out of life. Our fulfillment comes when we pay attention to what's presented to us, what's around us, and we take care of our responsibilities. And so, in conclusion, I feel as though we need to really take a step back, and understand that how we water the seed that's given to us will dictate how we grow and will dictate what we produce. I would love to produce something. I would love to spread my seed in that sense. Golly, that sounds weird when saying it in that context. There's a lot of worldly contextual issues with statements these days. But anyway, spreading seed does not mean that, but it does mean the idea of being something other than what you are. It means spreading God. If we spread God, if we grow up and spread God to our children, to our communities, to, you know, everywhere, then the fruit that's produced from all of that produces a forest that feeds nations forever. Forever. And if you want to be on that train, cool. But if not, then, well, I don't know what else to say. I mean, the truth is there, the lie is there. You can either go with the truth or go with the lie. I would prefer to stick in truth and continue to grow as such. And I pray that that's the case with you as well. All right, everybody. Thank you so much for listening to the podcast. Be sure to hit me up on Twitter at the writer Wesley. And I definitely would like to continue the conversation up there. So if you already are subscribed to me, leave me a comment. Let's chat, and I'll catch you guys in the next episode. Later.